So the first question we have is from Johan. As practicing, I see that sometimes having a very calm mind, no thoughts for a while, can trick me into self-attentiveness, but I know it is not. How to make sure I am not losing time, my mind floating on that space instead of self-attentiveness. Being actively self-attentive is still a very conscious thing, as it can be for knowing that the mind is without thoughts. I know that the goal is to go so deep that I will not have consciousness of any phenomena, but I am not attentive long enough, for now at least. That is the first question.
Yeah, right. Okay. Um, as Bhagavan made clear, what is important is persistent practice. The more we practice being self-attentive, the more our power of attention will be sharpened and we'll be able to attend to ourselves more keenly. That is, self-attentiveness is not a black and white situation. It's not a matter of either being self-attentive or not self-attentive. There are varying degrees of self-attentiveness. In fact, there's a whole range of degrees of self-attentiveness. So we are trying to focus our attention on ourselves as much as possible. We need not be concerned about thoughts, because whether thoughts exist, whether thoughts appear or not, we are always aware of ourself, of our own being, I am. So there is never a moment when we are not aware of ourself. So whether thoughts are present or not, we can try attending to ourselves. If we make if we mistake freedom from thought as self-attentiveness, we have not clearly understood what self-attentiveness is. That is, thoughts appear and disappear, so they are a temporary phenomena. States in which there are thoughts and states in which there are no thoughts are both temporary. So we are in self-investigation. What we are investigating, what we are attending to, is what shines permanently, namely our own being. We're always aware of our own being. So being self-attentive is attending to what is permanent, what is permanently shining in our heart as our own being, as I am. So the first thing is to distinguish what is permanent from what is temporary. That's why when talking about qualifications for following this path, in the classical texts of Advaita Vedanta, the first qualification, the first of the four qualifications, the so-called sadhana chatusteya, the first one is nitya anitya vastu viveka. Viveka means distinguishing. Nitya means what is permanent, anitya means what is impermanent. So we are trying to distinguish the permanent from the impermanent. What is permanent is only ourself. That is, in our awareness, so many things appear and disappear. But the only constant is ourself, the awareness in which or to which all these things appear and disappear. So we should be, our aim when trying to attend to ourselves is attending only to ourselves, that is, to what is permanent. So we shouldn't mistake any temporary appearance as ourself. So even a state of so-called, even a very calm mind, as Joanne expresses it, is still temporary. The mind goes through different stages. Sometimes the mind is relatively calmer, sometimes it's relatively more agitated. But these are just temporary phenomena. The mind itself is a temporary phenomena. It appears in waking and dream, it disappears in sleep. Thoughts are temporary. they appear in waking and dream, they disappear in sleep. We don't, even the waking state or dream state, we don't ever experience a state without thought. When thoughts cease entirely, that is either, if it's temporary, it's what is called manolaya. If it's permanent, it's what is called manonasa. So sleep is a state of manolaya. Any other state in which there's absolutely no thought is a state of manolaya. But when we are practicing, many people, when practicing self-investigation or any type of meditation, they think they're free of thoughts because the mind is relatively calm. Maybe the mental chatter has slowed down or even stopped. But according to Bhagavan, all phenomena are thoughts. The whole world is nothing but thoughts. Even the knower of the world, namely ego, is itself a thought. So anything other than our own being is a thought. So people say, I was in meditation for 20 minutes and I didn't have any thoughts. The very idea I was meditating is a thought. The idea that 20 minutes, time is also a thought, space is a thought, everything is a thought. So unless we go into a state of manolaya, which can be achieved sometimes by certain types of meditation, particularly certain yoga practices, can lead to a state called nirvikalpa samadhi, kevala nirvikalpa samadhi. That, as Bhagavan clarified, is a state of manolaya. It's like sleep. It's a temporary dissolution of the mind. But that is not our aim, because it's just temporary. What we are aiming for is manonasa. Manonasa is the complete annihilation. Manonasa means annihilation of the mind. So it's the complete eradication of ego. Ego is a false awareness of ourself. That is, as ego, we are aware of ourself as I am this body. So since ego is a false awareness, the only way to eradicate it is by correct awareness, by being aware of ourselves as we actually are. So it's only by self-investigation that we can achieve manonasa. There are many techniques such as pranayama by which we can achieve manolaya, but that's of no value. Anyway, every day we naturally achieve manolaya. When we're too tired to continue thinking, we fall asleep. That's a state of manolaya. So any other state of manolaya is no more spiritually beneficial than sleep. So that is not our aim. Our aim is to know what we actually are. What we actually are is what is permanent, what is ever known. If something is known at one time and not known at another time, it's not real. It's something that appears and disappears. So only that which exists and shines eternally is real. And that is only ourself, the awareness the awareness in which all phenomena appear and disappear. That is why one very valuable clue Bhagavan has given us is he often said, to investigate to whom. That is whatever may appear, whether an agitated state of mind, a calm state of mind, or any phenomenon of any kind whatsoever. To whom does it appear? That is, nothing can appear without the presence of ourself. Because it's only in our view, in our awareness, that things appear and disappear. So our aim is to turn our attention away from all things that appear and disappear, back towards ourself, the one to whom they appear and disappear. So we can explain this in words, but to actually, it's only by practice that we need to understand these things. We need to understand that what we are trying to attend to is only what is permanent. We're not trying to attend to anything impermanent, anything that appears and disappears. So we need to understand this clearly. But to gain the skill to hold on to what is permanent, namely ourself, takes practice. The more we practice, the more our Vishaya vasanas are weakened and our Sattvasana is strengthened. Vishaya vasanas are the inclination to attend to things other than ourselves, whereas the Sattvasana is the inclination to attend only to our own being and thereby to be as we actually are. So Sattvasana is the love to surrender and subside back into our own being. That is the power by which we hold on to self-attentiveness. That is cultivated by patient and persistent practice. So by practice, we are slowly refining our power of attention. That is, when we attend to ourself, we are attending to the original light of awareness. That is what illumines the mind. So by being self-attentive, we are, metaphorically speaking, we are bathing in clarity. So the mind is purified and clarified by this practice of self-attentiveness. As the mind becomes clarified, it becomes a sharper instrument, let's say. It's able to penetrate deeper within. So whatever difficulties we face when practicing self-attentiveness, the only way to overcome them is to persevere in the practice. We have to be patient. It takes time. For countless Janmas, countless lives, we have cultivated this liking to attend, cultivated and nourished this liking to attend to things other than ourselves. So to overcome this liking, these Vishaya vasanas, takes time. We need to be patient and we need to be persistent. So it's only by practice that we will gain the skill, the strength, the love to hold on to self-attentiveness more and more. This is why in the 6th paragraph of Nana, I'll just read the English meaning. That is, Bhagavan says, if other thoughts rise, that means, when he says if other thoughts rise, we need to remember thoughts means anything other than our own being. So if anything appears, if anything, without trying to complete them, in other words, without trying to follow those thoughts, it is necessary to investigate to whom they have occurred. However many thoughts arise, so what? Or what's it matter? Vigilantly, as soon as each thought emerges, in other words, as soon as our attention is diverted away from ourselves towards anything else, if one investigates to whom it has occurred, it will be clear to me. If one investigates who am I, the mind will return to its birthplace. The thought that had risen will also cease. When one practices and practices in this manner, for the mind, the power to stand firmly established in its birthplace increases. So here Bhagavan makes it very, very clear. It's only by practice that we will gain the strength to be as we actually are, to stand, when he says stand firmly established in its birthplace, the birthplace of the mind is our own being. So standing firmly in our being means being as we actually are. So the power to be as we actually are can be cultivated only by persistent practice. And I'll just clarify one or two more things here. When he says, vigilantly, as soon as each thought emerges, if one investigates to whom it has occurred, it will be clear to me. That means when he says as soon as each thought emerges, that means as soon as our attention is diverted away from ourselves towards anything else, we need to investigate to whom. Investigate to whom means turning our attention back towards ourself, the one to whom the thought has appeared, so one to whom any phenomenon has appeared. And when we turn our attention back, it will be clear all this is just appearing to me. So that me will become very clear when we turn our attention back towards ourselves. He then says, if we investigate who am I, some people take this to be a two-step process. They think you first have to ask to whom, and then you have to ask who am I. It is not like that. Firstly, Bhagavan doesn't ask us to ask any question, doesn't instruct us to ask any question. He says if one investigates. So investigate means we investigate by means of attention. So investigating to whom means turning our attention away from whatever appears back towards ourself. And when he then says, if one investigates who am I, what he implies is, having turned our attention back towards ourselves, we then need to hold on to that self-attentiveness. So investigating who am I means holding on to a self-attentiveness. And it's only by holding on to self-attentiveness that the mind will return to its birthplace. In other words, the mind will subside. When the mind subsides, all thoughts will also subside along with it, because we're no longer there, we're no longer attending to our thoughts. Thoughts cannot rise or stand except in our awareness. So if we don't attend to them, we're not aware of them, and therefore they cannot rise. So the way to deal with thoughts is not to be concerned about them, but simply to turn our attention back to ourselves. Because by turning our attention back to ourselves, we are withdrawing our attention from the thoughts, and the thoughts will automatically cease. So this is what we need to do. We need to practice and practice and practice. Doesn't matter how many times our attention gets diverted away from ourselves, we need to patiently and persistently try to turn our attention back to ourselves and to hold on to that self-attentiveness. We may be able to hold on to the self-attentiveness only for a second or two before the attention again slips outwards. Doesn't matter. We just need to persevere. If we persevere in this practice, we thereby cultivate the power to stand firmly established in our birthplace. In other words, to be as we actually are. And so we'll be able to hold on to a self-attentiveness more and more. But until I mean, it's not until this is a constant process, this practice. We go on practicing and practicing and practicing until eventually we will have so much love to be as we actually are, but we will be willing to surrender ourselves completely, let go of everything, and merge forever back into our source. So until then, patient and persistent practice is necessary. There's no other way. This is the only way. So what we need to remember is what we are to attend to, what we are to be concerned about is what is permanent. Let thoughts appear or disappear. They're no concern of ours. Our only concern is holding on to self-attentiveness, being self-attentive. That means attending to ourself, who are the only thing that is permanent, unchanging, self-shining. That is what we actually are. So we need to recognize that and do our best to hold on to that. I hope that's a clear answer to that question.
Yes, Michael, thank you. The next question we have is from Svega. I have been struggling to understand the answer you gave to this question for some time. I know this has been asked before, but I couldn't fully grasp the implication of your previous answer. The question is, if there is only one ego, and if that ego awakens, why don't we all awaken simultaneously? My understanding is that every person exists within the perspective of this one ego, and the entire history of the world is the continuous dream of that singular ego. Even before Ramana Maharishi appeared, there would have been people from the ego's perspective who discriminated between this ego and their apparent bodies, and who surrendered the ego to the pure I am. Yet, despite this, why does the ego persist? If we say that all these apparent people were actually the pure I am, manifesting within the ego's view, as Ramana Maharishi, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, and other sages, then how can we maintain that pure I am is only aware of itself and nothing else? And if this is the case, why would it need to arise and give teachings at all? This question may indicate gaps in my understanding of Bhagavan's teaching, and I'm very much looking forward to your response.
Okay. There are several questions being asked here, actually. But this teaching that there is only one ego, this is called Ekajiva Vada. That is the contention or the teaching that there's just one jiva. Jiva means ego. We need to understand this in the context of Bhagavan's teachings. That is, as Bhagavan clarified, within Advaita, there are three levels of explanations about the appearance of phenomena. At the most superficial level, it is said there's a God who has created this world. It's usually explained that that is Brahman in association with Maya is Ishvara, and Ishvara, by the power of Maya, has created this world. So all these sort of explanations are there. So the world was created. We are born into this world. We are one among many jivas. So this type of explanation is called Shrishti Drishti Vada. Shrishti means creation, Drishti means seeing, and Vada means the contention. So that is the teaching that is given to people with who have less viveka. This type of explanation will satisfy such people. But this isn't the deepest teaching of Advaita. This is a teaching, this is a concession for those who are unwilling to recognize that all this is just a dream. So the majority of explanations given in the texts of Advaita Vedanta are at this level. Bhagavan sometimes also spoke from that level also, because that's not what's appropriate to the understanding of many people. But if we are serious about going deeper in this path, there's a deeper teaching, which is what Bhagavan's, with the perspective from which Bhagavan generally gave his teachings, works like Uludu Napadu Nana Upadeshundiya. In fact, most of Bhagavan's own original writings are written from the perspective of Drishti Shrishti Vada. Drishti Shrishti implies that what comes first is drishti, perception. So the world seems to exist only because we perceive it. The classic example of this is dream. In dream, so long as we're dreaming, we seem to be a person in a world. There seems to be a world out there. We are just one among many people in that world. That's how it seems to us so long as we're dreaming. But as soon as we wake up from the dream, we recognize that that was all just a mental fabrication. It wasn't real. We know that whatever we experience in a dream, we know in retrospect, that is, when we come to this waking state, we know whatever we experienced in our dream had no existence independent of our perception of it. That is, a world seemed to exist there, and so many people seemed to exist there, and the person we seem to be, the body we seem to be, also seemed to exist there. Only in our view, they had no All those things we experience in dream have no existence whatsoever, independent of our perception of it. So this illustrates Shrishti Drishtivada. So, sorry, Drishti Shrishtivada. So according to Drishti Shrishtivada, what the waking state is just another dream. This is what Bhagavan teaches us. So just as in a dream, there's only one dreamer. Though there are many people in the dream, and the dreamer mistakes itself to be a person in the dream, the person we take ourselves to be in a dream is not the dreamer. The dreamer is the I that is aware of itself as I am this person. So long as we're dreaming, because we take ourselves to be a person, the person we take ourselves to be seems to be sentient. So every other person seems to be sentient. So we seem to be in a world with many people. And if we ask any person in the dream, are you seeing this world just like me? They'll say, yes, of course we are. So we seem to be just one among many people, just as we seem to be one among many people in the waking state. But when we wake up, we recognize that none of the people in the dream were aware of anything. Even the person we took ourselves to be was not aware. What was aware was the I that took itself to be, I am this person, I am this body. That is ego. So ego is the dreamer. And in a dream, there is only one dreamer. But so this is a very deep and subtle teaching Bhagavan has given us. We need to understand how this teaching is to be applied. Sometimes people used to ask Bhagavan, if it's true that there's only one jiva or one ego, who is the one ego? Bhagavan said, you are that. And then someone else asked, but Bhagavan, what about me? Bhagavan said, you are that. So that to many people that seems confusing. He said there's one ego, but he says to everyone who asks, who is the one ego? He says, you are that. Doesn't that imply that there are many egos? We need to understand how this is not a contradiction. That is, we get confused because as ego, we take ourselves to be a person. So we mistake the person we seem to be an ego. And therefore we take every other person to be ego. But ego is not the person we seem to be. It's the I who takes ourselves to be, I am this person. So we need to distinguish ego from the person. So this teaching, Ekajivavada, doesn't mean that there's just one person. So long as we allow our attention to go outwards, we experience ourselves as a person, and therefore, in our view, there are many other people. And so for acting in the external world, we need to act as if there are many jivas. Because in effect, there are many jivas. So long as we take ourselves, the jiva, to be a person, then to us, every person seems to be a jiva, and we need to treat every person accordingly. So Ekajivavada is not intended to be applied in our external life. Sometimes I explain this by saying, when Bhagavan teaches Ekajivavada, he is not teaching social solipsism, he is teaching metaphysical solipsism. Solipsism is the idea that there's just one I, just one, yeah. Well, it generally it's because people take I to be the person, it's generally taking me there's just one person. So I'm the only person, all the other people are just in my view. That's how solipsism is generally understood. And that can lead to selfishness. That can lead to, because I'm the only person, I'm the only one who matters, it doesn't matter if others. So that's a very gross form of solipsism. So in social solipsism, I am the only person. That's actually a type of mental illness if we begin thinking like that. So long as we're allowing our attention to go outwards, we seem to be a person, and every other person seems to be an I just like us, and there seems to be another ego. So as far as our life in the external world is concerned, we act as if there are a multiplicity of jivas, a multiplicity of egos. So when we're looking outwards, talking about others, talking about whether we're talking about great sages like Ramana Maharshi or Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, or we're talking just about ordinary people like you and me, there seem to be a multiplicity. But Bhagavan gave us this teaching, Ekajiva Vada, which is, as I say, it's an integral part of the deeper teaching called Drishti Shrishti Vada. Bhagavan gave us this teaching in order to, well, it's part of the teaching which is aimed at turning our attention within to investigate who am I, the one I in whose view all this multiplicity seems to exist. So it's the aim of Ekajiva Vada, and that is the only correct way of applying Ekajiva Vada is to turn our attention within and investigate who am I. So long as we're looking outwards, it seems to us we are just one person among many millions of people in this world. We need to act accordingly. So as far as the dream is concerned, we seem to be one among many. But the basic teaching of Advaita is that the ultimate truth is one. Manyness is just an appearance. So as we each experience ourselves as one, but we experience an appearance of manyness. We experience a multiplicity of phenomena and a multiplicity of people. Multiplicity is just an illusory appearance. So the Drishti Shrishti Vada is a much purer form of Advaita than this Drishti Shrishti. This Shrishti Drishti. That is, taking it that the world exists externally, has been created by God. That's a very diluted form of Advaita. And it's rather inconsistent, because if there's only one, all multiplicity must be an appearance. So to insist that there are many jivas, we're giving reality to the appearance. So the much deeper and more refined teaching of Advaita is Drishti Shrishti Vada. But Drishti Shrishti Vada, we need to remember, is not the ultimate truth. The ultimate truth is ajata. But as Bhagavan said, ajata is not a teaching. But ajata means that there's no creation. Nothing has ever come into being. Nothing has ceased to be. What exists is one, namely ourselves. We alone exist. We are eternal. We are immutable. We are infinite. We never undergo any change whatsoever. In this state of ajata, there's no one to be taught and there's no one to teach. There is just pure being. So when ajata is just an intimation of the ultimate truth. How does this ajata fit in with Drishti Shrishti Vada? It is the logical conclusion of it, because according to Bhagavan, all this multiplicity appears in the view only of ego. So when we rise, as soon as we rise as ego in waking or dream, we project all this multiplicity. This projection of multiplicity is what is called vikshepa. And that is, Maya is said to have two powers, avarana and vikshepa. Avarana is the power of veiling. That is, mistaking ourselves to be a body is our varana. We take ourselves to be something other than what we actually are. So that veils our real nature. And as soon as we mistake ourselves to be a body, we project all this multiplicity. So whenever we rise as ego, we that is, rising as ego entails projecting a body, taking that body to be I, and projecting a multiplicity of other phenomena which we perceive through the five senses and the mind of this body, that we mistake to be I. So this is how our varana and vikshepra are functioning. But this multiplicity is just an illusory appearance. There cannot be an illusory appearance without one to whom it appears. The one to whom it appears is ego. So who is the one ego? The one to whom all this appears. That's why Bhagavan said, when anyone asks Bhagavan, who is the one jiva? You are that. Because we experience ourselves as that which is aware of all this. So all this entire world appears in whose view? In my view. Who am I? We need to turn our attention back within to investigate ourselves. Regarding the question, so if we understand this correctly, there has only ever been one ego. Oh yeah, sorry, I was explaining about ajata. How ajata is the logical conclusion of Drishti Srishti Vada. So according to Drishti Srishti Vada, all this multiplicity, all phenomena, have no existence independent of our perception of it. That is, they appear only in our awareness, just like a dream. So, um, um, so the root the root cause of this appearance of multiplicity is ego, the one in whose view all this appears. If we investigate this ego, to whom do all this multiplicity of phenomena appear? We as ego thereby subside and dissolve back into our source. That is the nature of ego, as Bhagavan said. Ego rises, stands, and flourishes by attending to things other than itself. But by attending to itself, it will subside and dissolve back into its source. This is what we are doing when we are practicing self-investigation. We are turning our attention back to ourselves. Because we don't turn our attention 100% towards ourselves. We direct our attention back to ourselves partially, but not fully. Or as Sadhu Om expressed it, we are not turning the full 180 degrees. We're turning something less than 180 degrees back towards ourselves. So we never completely cease to be aware of other phenomena. So we remain as ego. But if we turn our attention back to ourselves so keenly, but we thereby cease to be aware of anything other than ourselves, we then experience ourselves as pure awareness. And as soon as we experience ourselves as pure awareness, ego is thereby eradicated, because ego is a false awareness of ourselves. Pure awareness is what we actually are. When we experience ourselves as pure awareness, ego is thereby annihilated. Once we see what we actually are, we can no longer mistake ourselves to be anything else. So the annihilation of ego is achieved by turning our attention within so keenly that we subside and dissolve forever back into our source. In other words, we attend to ourselves so keenly that we become aware of ourselves as the pure being awareness that we actually are. As soon as ego is dissolved, it is not, that is, the dissolution of ego is not, even now, ego doesn't actually exist. We seem to be ego because we're attending to other things. But if we attend to ourselves keenly enough, there's no such thing as ego to be found. So what is called the manonasa, the annihilation of mind or eradication of ego, is nothing but seeing that no such thing as ego has ever existed. So when ego is found to be ever non-existent, all the things that appeared, all the multiplicity of phenomena that appeared in the view of ego are also non-existent. So the self-investigation will eventually lead to the experience of ajata, the experience of I alone am, I alone always have been, and I alone always will be. Nothing else has ever appeared at all. So that is the ultimate truth. That is what we will experience at the end of our journey when we investigate ourselves keenly enough and thereby know what we actually are. We'll see there never was any ego and therefore never was any mind, body, or world or anything else. There's only just, as Bhagavan puts it in verse 28 of Upadeshundya, Anadi, Ananta, Akanda, Satchidananda. Anadi means beginningless. Ananta means endless, limitless, infinite. Akanda means unbroken, undivided. Satchidananda, that is being, awareness, happiness. That is what we actually are. We are infinite Satchidananda. Infinite means it has no beginning, it has no end, it has no limit of any kind whatsoever. Not only does it not have any external limits, it also doesn't have any internal limits. So it's undivided. It's one infinite whole. That is what we actually are. When we experience ourselves as that, it will be clear that nothing else has ever existed. So the ultimate truth is ajata. So the ultimate truth is there's no jiva at all. But for the purposes of practice, that is, when we say there's just one jiva, one ego, we are closer to the truth than when we say there are many egos, because the many egos, the many jivas, exist only in the view of the one ego. So when it's asked, like here, Swega asked this question, if there is only one ego, and if that ego awakens, why don't we all awaken simultaneously? When we wake up from a dream, what happens? Do we, after waking up from a dream, do we think, oh, when are all my friends in the dream going to wake up? They must all be still sleeping. No. As soon as we wake up, the dream comes to an end. So as soon as the ego is annihilated, the whole dream of multiplicity comes to an end. So there are no others to wake up. So if the one ego does wake up, then that's the end of the whole dream. There's no other ego remaining to wake up. So the thing is, we look externally and we see, for example, we read the life of great sages like Bhagavan and Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, and we read that they annihilated ego. So if they've annihilated ego, why are we still here, we think? Because when we say they have annihilated ego, we're already talking about a multiplicity of egos. As soon as we look outwards, we see the appearance of a multiplicity of egos. We take every person to be an ego. That's how it seems to be in our view. So the multiplicity of jivas, of egos, is as real as, so long as we take ourselves to be this body, so real is the multiplicity of jivas. But when this one ego that takes itself to be I am this body is eradicated, the appearance of all the many other egos is also eradicated. So this is a very deep and subtle teaching. We need to think about it very carefully. We shouldn't try to apply it when looking outwards. When we're looking outwards, there's an appearance of multiplicity. We see many things. So we see we see trees, mountains, houses, cars, ships, aeroplanes, all sorts of things we see in this world. All the multiplicity of jivas is as real as all these. And all these are as real as this false awareness, I am this body. So long as we take ourselves to be this body, the world will seem to be real and jivas will seem to be many. But though it all seems so, we need to understand, though all this is just seeming, it's not real. It all exists only in the view of myself, the dreamer who is now dreaming myself to be, I am this person, I am Michael, I am Swega, I am Tiru, I am whoever. That is, we identify ourselves as a person and thereby give reality to all this appearance of multiplicity. So for all external purposes, we need to live in this world and act in this world as if there are a multiplicity of jivas, because that multiplicity of jivas are as real as what we now take ourselves to be. But all these multiplicity of jivas appears in whose view? To whom does all this multiplicity appear? To me. Who am I? That is the path that Bhagavan has shown us. When we investigate ourselves and know ourselves as we actually are, we will wake up from this dream, and along with the dissolution of this one ego, all the other egos will also be dissolved. So we need to think about this very carefully and understand it. If we begin asking questions, then there's so many people in this world. Which person is the ego who's seeing the world? That shows a misunderstanding, because that shows we're again confusing. We are equating a person with ego. The first most important thing to understand is ego is not a person. Ego is that which mistakes itself to be, I am this person. As ego, we always identify ourselves as a body. Identifying ourselves as a body means identifying ourselves as a person. When we talk about persons, we point out to bodies. This person is a good person. This person is a bad person. I like this person. I don't like that person. We're referring to a body when we talk about a person. So, and every body seems to be that every living body. We're not talking about dead bodies. Once the body dies, we say, "Oh, the person has gone." Poor Joe Bloggs, he is no more. He was a good fellow, but sadly he's no more. We say so. The body is still lying there, but the person has gone. So, but actually, what has gone? I mean, what has happened is the body has died, so that person has ceased to exist. So the person, that is, when we talk about a person, we talk about a living body, and in a living body there's life, there's prana, and there's also mind, intellect, and will. So these five, the so-called five shis, panchakosha, these are what make up the person. Ego is not any of the five shis. Ego is the I that identifies itself as, I am this bundle of five shis. I am this person called Michael or Swega or whoever. So we need to think about this very carefully. And as I say, this is a very deep and subtle teaching Bhagavan has given us. We need to think about it, understand why Bhagavan has given us this teaching, how we should apply this teaching, how we shouldn't apply this teaching by trying to apply it to the external world. So long as we look outwards, for all intents and purposes, there is a multiplicity of jivas. That's how it seems to be. And the multiplicity of jivas are as real as the world. And the world seems to us to be very real, so long as we identify a body as I. So this Ekajiva Vada is taught to us only for the purpose of self-investigation, not for any other purpose. So that's why I say this is not, Bhagavan never taught social solipsism. Bhagavan didn't sit there as if he's the only one not caring about anyone else. We all know Bhagavan was the very embodiment of kindness, love, and affection. So it's obviously not social solipsism that Bhagavan is teaching. What he is teaching is metaphysical solipsism. He's teaching that all this multiplicity that we now experience, it's all a dream. And the dream exists only in the view of the dreamer. The dreamer is not the person we take ourselves to be in the dream. The dream is we who mistake ourselves to be that person. We always need to separate ourselves from the person. That is, what we actually are is neither the person nor ego. Ego is something between what we actually are, which is Satchit, and this person, which is the body, which is Jada. Ego is that which is between. So ego is not this person. If ego investigates itself, it will find its own reality, which is Satchit. So Satchit alone is what we actually are. But when we identify as a body, ourselves as a body, we who mistake this body to be I are ego. The person isn't ego. The ego is that which identifies the person as I. That's very, very important to understand. If we don't understand the distinction between ego, or jiva, whatever we call it, and the person, we have not even begun to understand Bhagavan's teachings or the teachings of Advaita. Deham Naham. It's the very foundation of this all of Advaita teaching. Deham Naham means this body. Deham is not I. Naham. So the body is the person. The body means all the five sheaves of a person. Ego is something different from that. If this ego discriminates, I am not this body, then who am I? If it turns its attention within to investigate itself, then it will find Soham. Deham, Naham, Koham, Soham. This is the very heart of Advaita teachings. So what we actually are is not even this one. Now we seem to be a jiva. And we seem to be one jiva. Nobody is aware of himself as more than one jiva. So in the view of this one jiva, there are many jivas. But if we investigate this one jiva, we'll find even this one jiva is unreal. What is real is only he. God, the reality, Shiva, Brahman, whatever we want to call it, Krishna, whatever name we, Krishna, Rama, whatever name we want to call it, that alone is what is real. That is what is always shining in our heart as I am. Yes,
Thank you,
so
Michael.
yes.
As a follow-up, so does this all imply that one ego, since time immemorial, has not yet surrendered itself to the self?
Yes. That is
Oh,
what this spiritual path is all about. It's all about surrender. That is, when we begin on the path of bhakti, well, in the very early stages, when people begin worshipping God, why do we worship God? We worship God because we're not able to achieve. We recognize our own weakness. We recognize we can't achieve all that we want to achieve by our own strength. So we turn to God for help. Initially we expect God to give us health, wealth, and all the other things we want to save us from all the dangers and calamities of life. We worship God for our own, for the well-being of ourselves and our family. This is called Kamya Bhakti. This is where Bhakti starts. As we worship God more and more, we get more and more love for God because we become more and more clearly aware of how God is taking care of us. Slowly our Vishaya Bhakti, our love for all these things that we hope to get from God, matures into Deva Bhakti, love for God himself. So the real bhakti begins only when the real bhakti is only nishkamya bhakti, when we're not expecting anything from God. So we begin to worship God just for his own sake. We love God not because of anything we hope to gain from God, but we love him for his own sake, not for anything we want to gain from him. When we love him for his own sake, we want to become very close to him. We want to we want to be as close to him as possible. But what stands between us and God? The first thing that we notice, we have so many desires, so many likes, dislikes, and so on. And life doesn't always go according to what we like. So things happen in life but we don't like. But we understand God is all-knowing, all-loving, all-powerful. So whatever is happening in this world is happening only by his grace. So the problem is, why we suffer is because our will is not attuned to his will. He wants something, we want something else. So we suffer. So we then want to surrender our will to the will of God. In other words, we want to give up all our own likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, and so on, and joyfully accept whatever God chooses to give us. So surrender begins with trying to surrender our will. So long as we're worshipping God as if he's something other than ourselves, we can reduce by having more and more love for God, our liking for other things diminishes. So we can reduce the strength of our likes and dislikes and desires, attachments, and so on, to a considerable extent by means of Anya Bhakti, taking God to be something other than ourselves. But the very nature of ego is to have desire and attachment. So we cannot completely free ourselves from desire and attachment so long as we remain as ego. So as the mind gets more and more purified, we begin to understand that the real obstacle, what really stands between us and God, is our separate existence as ego. And so long as we remain as separate from God, we will have our own, to a greater or less extent, we'll have our own likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, and so on. So in order to surrender our will completely to God, we have to surrender ourselves completely to God. So we then recognize God is not something other than ourselves. It was only because of our strong attachment to this separate identity that God seemed to be something other than ourselves. Now we begin to understand God is not actually separate from ourselves. He is our own reality. He's what is ever shining in our heart as I. As Krishna says in the Gita, Aham Atma Gudakesha. Krishna says he's a self in the heart of every living being, every sentient being. So that is the real nature of, and God reveals himself. God in the form of Guru, Krishna was God in the form of Guru, teaching this to Arjuna. He reveals that he is none of, he is our own reality. He is what we actually are. So what stands between us and him is this false identification. I am this person. If we're this person, we're obviously not God. We can't be both the person and God at the same time, because the person is finite, God is infinite. So it is this false identification which stands between us and God. So we need to give up this false identification. This is self-surrender. And that self-surrender can be achieved, that is, we can, as I said, we can surrender our will to a considerable extent by means of Anya Bhakti. But to surrender ourself, the only means is Atma-vichara, which is Ananya Bhakti, because we understand God is not something other than ourselves. He's our own reality. So in order to know God as he is, we need to know ourselves as we actually are. So we turn our attention within, and with great love, we seek to know God who is ever shining in our heart as I. That is how we surrender ourselves completely. So the spiritual path is all about surrender. We are trying to surrender ourselves to God. We start off with beginning with grosser forms of surrender, doing puja and japa and dhyana. All these are all good things to do. But ultimately, who is the doer of puja? Who is the doer of japa? Who is the doer of dhyana? This one is the one who feels I am separate from God. So we need to give up this separate I. That is self-surrender. So Bhagavan's path is all about self-surrender from the beginning to end. But what he makes clear is self-surrender can be accomplished only by means of self-investigation. Because the self we are to surrender is ego. The nature of ego, as Bhagavan explains, for example, in verse 25 of Uludunaptu, ego comes into being grasping form. Urupatriundam, as he says in verse 25. Urupatriundam means grasping form, it comes into being. Urupatrinikum, grasping form, it stands. So ego cannot rise and it cannot stand without grasping form. And then he says, Urupatri undu mika ongum, grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes abundantly. That is, having grasped the form of a body as I, then the mind is constantly, the ego is constantly, its attention is going outwards, grasping other forms. So by attending to anything other than ourselves, we are feeding and nourishing this ego. And then he says, Uruvittu urupatram, leaving form and grasp form, because the ego cannot stand for a moment without grasping form. If it leaves one form, it grasps another form. So grasping form is the very nature of ego. So long as grasping form means attending to anything other than ourselves, because ego itself, he describes in that same verse, in the last line, he describes it as Uruvatra Payahande. That means the formless demon ego. It's formless because it has no form of its own. It's a demon because it identifies a form. It possesses forms and says, I am this form. That's the demonic nature of ego. So how to get rid of this ego? So long as we are attending to anything other than ourselves, we are feeding and nourishing ourselves as ego. But if instead of grasping form, if we try to grasp ourselves, what happens? He says in that verse, Tedinal otum pidicum. Tedinal literally means if seeking. That implies if ego seeks to know its own reality, if it seeks to know who am I, it will, autum pidicum means it will run away, it will take flight, it will flee from the battlefield, so to speak. That means ego will subside and dissolve back into its source. So what Bhagavan implies in verse 25 of Uludunaptu is that the nature of ego is to rise, stand, and flourish by attending to forms, things other than itself, but to subside and dissolve back into its source by attending to itself. So how are we to surrender ourselves? Only by attending to ourselves, by turning our attention within to investigate who am I. That's why in the next verse, verse 26, he says, Ahande undayin anatumundahum. If ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. Because it's only when we rise as ego that all other things seem to exist, because they seem to exist only in the view of ourselves as ego. This again comes back to the ekajiva, it's only the one ego. So if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. Ahande indrel indruanatum. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Because nothing can exist except in the view of ego. All the multiplicity exists only in the view of ego. So if ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Ahande yavamam. Ego itself is everything. That is, when we are dreaming, we are seeing ourselves as that entire dream world. The dream world has no existence apart from ourselves. likewise, ego is now seeing itself as all this. Well, this is actually just a dream, as Bhagavan says. So everything is just an expansion of ego. Ego sees itself as all this multiplicity. And it takes itself to be just a small part of that multiplicity, just to be one person out of that vast universe. Then in the next final sentence, he says, Adnal yaduidu entru nadale overdal yavamenor. That means, therefore, know that investigating what this is giving up everything. Investigating what this is means investigating what ego is. So if we as ego turn our attention within to investigate who am I, we, as he explained in the previous sentence, we will thereby subside and dissolve back into our source. When we as ego dissolve, everything else dissolves along with us. So investigating what we are is surrendering not only ourselves, it's surrendering everything. It's returning everything to God. When we merge back into God, everything merges into God. He alone remains. Is that clear, Swega? Is that a
yeah,
clear
I ask
answer?
you a question?
Yes.
What, as long we are still in this world and we live in the dream world, right?
Yes.
And we do see certain things. Does it make sense to take these things and use it as a path to get inward? Like, let's say when we talk to a person, instead of looking, we still live in this life, right? We got to talk to people,
Yes.
etc. So instead of talking to the person and thinking I'm talking to a person, I'm now in this world, maybe I could talk to this person and look on that person that he is also the person. What I'm seeing is not the real him. So I'm looking on his divine, on his in part, and I'm doing now also connecting to my inward, because I'm connecting to my divine when I'm talking to that person, because I want to make him feel good or whatever. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It does make sense. That is, the reality of ego is Satchit, the pure being awareness, which is God. That is what is real. So ego derives its seeming reality from Satchit, and everything else derives its seeming reality from ego, which derives its reality from Satchit. So Satchit is the ultimate reality of everything. Satchit is what is shining in our heart as I am. So when we hold on to I am, we're holding on not only to the reality of ourselves, but to the reality of everyone. So so long as we take ourselves to be this body, as this body, we seem to be engaged in activities in the world. We meet people, we talk to people, we have work to do. We may have wife, husband, children, parents, so many near and dear ones we are taking care of. And we meet people under so many circumstances. We meet people we meet our family members whom we love. We meet people in our workplace. We meet people. Often we have to meet people in this world we really don't like. We may have a lot of problems with the people, but we have to meet them. But if we are trying all the time to hold on to our own being, in other words, if we're trying to, in the background of all our activities, if we're trying to hold on to I, our likes and dislikes will diminish, because we will see beyond the outward appearance. By holding on to I, we are seeing the reality of everything. So that's why Bhagavan said, there are not two kinds of, in the 19th paragraph, second last paragraph of Nana, Bhagavan said, there are not two minds, a good mind and a bad mind. Mind is only one. When the mind is under the sway of subha vasanas, that's good vasanas, favorable vasanas, we call it a good mind. If it's under the sway of unfavorable vasanas, we call it a bad mind. So when we see people in the world, some people we say, oh, this is a good person. Others we say, oh, this is a very bad person. But the reality is the same. It's just the vasanas that are manifested in each person are different. So some people have nice, pleasant, agreeable vasanas. They're decent people, honest, kind, considerate. So we like such people. Some people seem to be very selfish, arrogant, wrapped up in themselves, not caring about others. So we naturally feel some sort of aversion. But Bhagavan says, likes and dislikes are both to be disliked. So however, he says, however bad others may appear to be, it's not appropriate, it's not good to dislike them. Likes and dislikes are both to be disliked. So the best way to implement these teachings that Bhagavan has given us there is by trying as much as possible in all circumstances to remember ourselves, to remember our own being. Because the more we remember our own being, the more we as ego subside. And when we subside, our likes and dislikes subside along with us. And thereby, we're able to see beyond the good or bad qualities of people. And because we're holding on to the reality, the one reality of the entire appearance. Is that a satisfactory answer to your question?
My question, very good. So what I understand is, let's say when I eat something, what I
Yeah.
don't like, but I eat
Yeah.
it because I don't have a like dislike. Just I know it's not the food; it's the inner part of it. It's all divine,
Yeah.
and it's not me, not my ego. Or when I talk to a person, but it's hard for me to talk to him, like you said, because he is arrogant or whatever, selfish. And I talk to him because I'm decided I'm not looking. I look on everything one. Is
Yes.
that a good way to connect to my
That's a good way.
inwards and to the real I am?
Yes, these are all helpful. That is, in this, the what stands in the way of us surrendering ourselves completely is our own likes and dislikes. So by trying to diminish our likes and dislikes, we're not feeding the likes and dislikes, trying to tolerate those who we find intolerable, trying to be kind to those who we don't feel inclined to be kind to. All these helps to, these are all part of the process of surrendering our own likes and dislikes. Though we can give up our likes and dislikes entirely only by surrendering ourselves, in the process, in day-to-day life, giving up our likes and dislikes is very, very important. Both our likes and dislikes for people and also likes and dislikes for things. Like sometimes we're in situations, we may be offered some food, we may not particularly like that food, but if we refuse, supposing someone kindly offers us food, that food may not be to our liking, but we accept it because we recognize it's been offered with kindness. So there's so many opportunities in life, small opportunities and big opportunities for us to deny ourselves, deny our that is to deny our own likes and dislikes, to deny this ego that keeps on asserting itself with its own likes and dislikes. But the most effective way to curb the rising of, I mean, all these help to curb the rising of ego, but the most effective way to curb the rising of ego is just to be self-attentive. If ego rises, if we look at it, it subsides. So, of course, it's not an object that we look at. That's metaphorically saying, to the extent to which we are self-attentive, to that extent we will be subsiding. And to the extent to which we subside, our likes, dislikes, everything else will subside along with us. As Bhagavan says in the final paragraph of Nana, if oneself rises, everything rises. If oneself subsides, everything subsides. So Bhagavan's path is a path of subsidence. We need to subside more and more and more. And the most effective means to subside is to hold on to self-attentiveness as much as possible.
Michael,
Clear.
I'm
Thank you
sorry
very
to
much.
interrupt, but
Yes, sorry,
when we say that so when we say we have to give up our likes and dislikes, it's not particular likes and dislikes, not only the particular likes and dislikes that's associated with Swega, but the likes and dislikes of ego that manifest through, say, like all the bodies across the planet. Is that the way I should understand?
Well, the world is full of people, and all the people seem to have their own likes and dislikes. We can't do anything about other people's likes and dislikes. It's our own likes and dislikes. Now we take our, that is, the likes and dislikes are not actually Swega's likes and dislikes. They are ego's likes and dislikes. The ego takes itself to be Swega and has all these likes and dislikes. So it seems to be Swega's likes and dislikes, but actually it's not Swega's. Swega is Jada. Swega is just a body and mind, which are all Jada phenomena. The likes and dislikes belong to ego. So as ego, we have likes. We all have likes and dislikes. We cannot, as ego, we cannot totally eradicate our likes and dislikes, but we need to reduce them to the extent possible, because so long as we have strong likes and dislikes, we will not be willing to surrender ourselves. If you want to root out a bush, but if that bush is very thick, dense bush, you can't even, to root it out, you need to cut the root. But you can't get at the root because there's so many leaves and branches, and it's a big tangle, and so many thorns and everything are there. So first we have to cut back the leaves and branches. So trying to reduce our likes and dislikes is like cutting the leaves and branches of the tree. But the leaves and branches will continue sprouting until we cut the root. So why we are cutting back the leaves and branches in order to get at the root. The root is ego. That is, so our focus should be on ego.
So is this why, as ego, the best thing we could do to the world is not to change the world or whatsoever, but to just reduce our likes and dislikes by
If
surrendering
we
to the self?
change ourselves, that is sufficient. If we cease rising as ego, that is the greatest good we can do to the world.
Okay. Yeah.
That's why Bhagavan,
Thank you.
when people came to Bhagavan and talked about the world has always been a place of injustice. From time immemorial, there have been injustices. There always will be injustices. That's the nature of the world. Because some people are stronger and assert their will and take advantage of others. So during Bhagavan's time, it was, for example, it was a time of British rule in India. So many. There was such a strong nationalist movement wanting to make the British leave India and to regain self-determination. So that was very popular in those days. So those sort of things were there. There were many other problems in India also. There were social issues about caste, about this, about that. So there were so many politics going on in the midst of all this freedom struggle. So people often used to come to Bhagavan and talk about this problem or that problem. Bhagavan used to say, he who has created this world knows how to take care of it. Leave it to him. Surrender yourself to him. So there you can see, Bhagavan is not talking Drishti Shrishti Vada there. There he talks Shrishti Drishti Vada, because that's appropriate for people whose minds are very outward going. So he reminds them, God has created this world, let him take care of it. Your only responsibility is to surrender yourself to God.
Yeah, thank you.
Because the nature of the world is, even if one problem is solved, other problems come up. Previously, a big problem in India was the presence of British there. When the British went, the politicians came in their place. So it's always, the world is always the same. Whether it's a foreigner or whether it's your own people, it's all the same. So this is the nature of the world was never meant to be imperfect. Why Krishna says in the Gita, when the injustice, where a dharma rises and the dharma is being suppressed, from age to age I come again. So God comes again and again and again, but the world still remains the same, because this is the nature of the world. God didn't intend this world to be a perfect place, because if God, the problem is we think that our happiness and misery depends upon external circumstances. So we want God to give us a very pleasant external circumstances. But if he were to do that, supposing he were to put us in heaven or somewhere, that's actually cheating us, because that's not real happiness. Even if we're in the highest heaven, even if we're in Brahma Loka, we'll still have desires and so on. We cannot be satisfied by even the greatest pleasures. Nothing other than the infinite happiness that we actually are can satisfy us. So in order to experience the infinite happiness that we actually are, we need to know ourselves. So anything short of self-knowledge, in other words, anything short of the annihilation of ego, is not going to satisfy us. The very nature of ego is to be always dissatisfied. So Bhagavan we want petty things from Bhagavan. He's not concerned about these petty things. He wants to give us the supreme happiness. He doesn't actually give us the supreme happiness. He makes us see that supreme happiness is what we always actually are. Nothing other than that will satisfy us.
Question. When Bhagavan teaches us to connect ourselves, right? That's the supreme happiness, like you said.
Yes.
That's connecting to the I,
It's not actually connecting, because we have to be separate to be connected.
Right.
Gaudapada in Mandukya Karika, he uses a beautiful term, aspasa yoga. Yoga means connecting, joining, but aspasa means not touching. So how can you connect with something without touching? But what Gaudapada implies by that is, the problem is our connection with this body. So we need to disconnect ourselves from this body. In one verse in Gita, Krishna defines what is yoga. He says, dukkha samyoga viyogam yogam. That is, yoga is the disconnection of the connection with happiness, with unhappiness, with misery. So the whole problem is that we've connected ourselves with this body. We need to separate ourselves by holding on to ourselves. Metaphorically, we can say, yes, we have to connect with ourselves. We have to hold on to ourselves, but it's really not,
Right.
It's actually just being as we actually are. But in order to be as we actually are, we need to turn our attention back within, which is what we describe as holding on to ourselves. But it doesn't mean ourself is something other than ourself for us to hold on to. It means by keeping our attention fixed on I, we thereby subside and merge back into our own reality, what we always actually are.
Right. And we definitely have to surrender completely our will, that we don't have no will.
Yes, yes.
Whatever we have, right?
But we can never
completely
surrender our will. So without surrendering ego. So we need to surrender our will as much as possible in order to surrender ego. And only by surrendering ego can we surrender our will completely.
Right. Until we get to that point, surrendering, like you said, it's very hard to surrender completely the will, that our health, wealth, whatever, everything, we surrender it. As long as we get there, and we still feel we won if we didn't surrender. Is there a God who could give it to us? Is there a God to ask for, or there's like no such a thing even than a God who could give us health or wealth, because the God who created forever is not there. It's only the I am.
Bhagavan sometimes said, God cannot give us what is already ours. But what God does do is make us see what we actually are. So it's not, it seems to us that Bhagavan is giving us something, but actually he's not giving us anything. He's just showing us the treasure inside our own house. In our own heart is the infinite treasure, the infinite happiness that we are all seeking, but we're looking for it outside. Bhagavan tells us, stop looking outside, look within. It's only within. So, is there a God? Yes, certainly. That is the ultimate reality of God is I am. But so long as we rise as ego, we seem to separate ourselves. So God seems to be separate from ourselves. But we need to understand that though God seems to be separate from ourselves, he seems separate only because we have risen as ego, thereby seemingly separating ourselves from him. He is never separate from us. He's always our own reality.
Mhm. Can we pray to him, or there's no praying because there's no real thing? Jesus.
If we cannot pray to him, why did Bhagavan sing Arunachal Stuti Panchakam? The 5 hymns to Arunachal.
Right.
So many ways Bhagavan prayed. Prayer can be very effective but we need to pray for the right things. What Bhagavan has taught us in Arunachal Stuti Panchakam is what we should pray for. We should pray only for the love to surrender, the love to subside back within. Anything that will be conducive to the subsidence of ego, that is what we should pray for. And by praying for that, we are attuning our will with the will of God. Because God wants nothing more than to annihilate this ego. Because God knows very well that God or Guru or Bhagavan, whatever we call him, he knows very well the root cause of all our problems is our rising as ego. So praying for the love to surrender this ego is tuning our will with his will. And that is a very important step on this path of self-surrender. Because the more we attune our will with his, the more we'll have the love to turn within and subside back into the heart. Some other person, Ravi, has his hand up. So can I answer his question now?
Sir, this self has elements like opinion, judgment, seeking, motives, efforts. All these are elements of self. Even any kind of control or looking for answer or asking a question is also this egoic self.
Yes.
So whenever any question is raised, it's egoic self raise the question, and any answer comes from the within, that is also coming from egoic self, right?
It depends. That is, if we are turning our attention within, this ego is subsiding. And the clarity that comes from within is not ego. The clarity is Bhagavan. That is, Bhagavan is that clarity of self-awareness, the clarity of Satchit, that ever shining in our heart. So the real answers comes not just from the mind, it comes from within. It comes from within, not in the form of thoughts, but in the form of clarity.
But until that clarity we do have, any kind of answer is coming from egoic self.
If it's just a mental answer, yes. But
So
the answer coming from ego, if we are following Bhagavan's teachings, for example, if we are trying our best to put what he taught us into practice, if we are often reading and thinking about his teachings, then the answers that come from within come from though they may come in the form of thoughts and words, they're coming that is, they are born out of that clarity that Bhagavan is nurturing in our heart, but clarity that is always there, but that is seemingly covered over by our outward going attention. The more we turn our attention within, the more the ever-present clarity is rising up from within. We need to remember about ego. Ego is unreal as ego, but it is real as Sat-Chit. That is, ego is a conflation of Sat-Chit and this body. That's why it's called Chit Jada Granti. The Chit element is that fundamental awareness, I am, the awareness of our own being. That is Sat-Chit. And this body is what we take ourselves to be. So ego as ego is unreal because it's a conflation with, but the essence of ego is that Sat-Chit, what we actually are. So the more we turn our attention within, the more we will find clarity arising from within our heart. So it's very, when we talk about answers coming from ego, we need to be clear. We need to recognize that there is this inner clarity. So to what extent are we drawing only from the mind, and to what extent are we drawing from that clarity? We need to distinguish that. So we can't say everything that comes from within is egoic, because some things are coming as a result of the clarity that is rising in our heart, as a result of us turning within. And we're turning within by the grace of Bhagavan, by the love that he has given us.
But we can't turn within because the natural phenomenon of this mind is to go outward. Whatever effort we put, it goes outward.
That
So
is we can't say, but we can't go within, because the nature of ego or mind as ego is to go outwards. But the essence of ego is Sat-Chit, which is to always be within. So if we have a liking to turn within, we can turn within. That's where the love is necessary. And that's where grace is essential, because that love to turn within comes from Sat-Chit, comes from our own reality. Because the nature of ego, as you say, it's always to go outwards. So ego always has a liking to go outwards. So the love to turn within is not natural to ego. It's natural to our own being. So it is by grace alone that we as ego gain the love to turn within. It's very, very subtle. It's very, very subtle, because we need to remember this ego it's unreal as ego, but it's not entirely unreal. It has this element of reality in it. So when we are allowing our attention to go outwards, we are feeding the ego nature. But when we turn our attention within, we are erasing this ego nature and uncovering our real nature.
So for me, there is always a conflict between outward and inward movement, because I want to go inside, but natural phenomenon of mind is taking me outside, and I could keep pulling it inside.
It's the same for all of us. We all have this problem. That's why this practice and practice and practice is necessary.
And Bhagavan says that once you abide in the self, everything will be solved.
Yes.
And somebody asked how to abide and how to find the self. So he said that is a sadhana.
Yeah, exactly. But practice, abhyasa, is necessary. But it's not even a matter of finding the self. We always know ourselves. We always know I am. The problem is, that is, Bhagavan often said, jnana is not a new knowledge to be attained. But if jnana were a new knowledge to be attained, what is newly attained will be lost. But jnana is our own real nature. The problem is we have covered over this jnana with the ajnana. The ajnana in the form of ego. I am this body. So in order to eradicate this ajnana, we need to hold on to the jnana, which is ever shining in our heart, as our own being, as I am.
But we can hold it to it, and if we know what that self is or jnana is,
If who knows?
that's the problem.
No, we all know. I don't. If we say I don't know myself, Bhagavan said that is ridiculous. Because the I that says I don't know myself is the self, but it's claiming not to know. We all know ourselves. The problem is we know ourselves, but we know ourselves as something other than what we actually are. So to know ourselves as we actually are, we need to attend to ourself alone. We need to attend to I alone. The more we attend to I, the more the adjuncts, the upadis, will drop off.
This self is absolutely transparent. I can't, means this self,
It's not transparent. You're clear. You say I can't. What is that I? We all are aware I. Do you have any doubt about your existence? Do you not know I am? Bhagavan said it is so clear that even for the dullest of people, everyone knows I am. But the problem is because we're looking for some object, so we say, oh, I don't know it. But it's not an object, it's our own being. You yourself are what you're looking for. The I that says I don't know is the I that we're seeking to know. I mean, we already know it, we're seeking to know it as it actually is. All these things will become clear to the extent to which we put them into practice. The more we try to turn our attention towards ourselves, towards our own being, towards I, the clearer all these things will become. That's why practice is necessary. Abhyasa, sadhana, whatever we call it, it's necessary.
but somewhere in that book itself, he says that there is no need of any kind of practice or sadhana because you know that you are that.
Where did he say
We
that?
are that.
Where did he say that?
Uh,
A lot of
he,
things are recorded in books that are not very accurate. In his own original writings, he very, very clearly read the original Nana, the essay form written by Bhagavan. Ipati paraka paraka, he says, by practicing and practicing this way, practice is absolutely essential. Bhagavan said nobody succeeds in this path without persistent practice.
again, this practice comes from the self.
The love to practice comes from the self, but the practice is done by ego. It's as ego, but we need to investigate ourselves and know ourselves. And thereby, when we as ego know ourselves as we actually are, we cease to be ego and remain as we actually are. So our real nature, Atma-swarupa, doesn't need to do any self-investigation because it is the infinite clarity of pure awareness. It doesn't need to know. There's nothing it needs seek to know. It's ego that has covered itself with the appearance of ignorance. So ego has to remove this ignorance by investigating itself and thereby seeing itself as it actually is.
any kind of practice or sadhana is done by the self, that means egoic self, and whatever is discovered, it will be discovered as egoic self. That's my
No.
understanding.
That you're talking about practices, outward going practices. But when this ego turns its attention back within to see what it actually is, ego will subside and merge back into its source. What will then remain is what we actually are. That is why this Atma-vichara is the only means by which to eradicate ego. We need to pay very close attention to Bhagavan's core teaching as expressed in works like Nana, Ulajunapadu, Upadeshundiya, Anma-vichara, Arunachashtakam. Bhagavan has repeated the same thing again and again and again, but we need to read it attentively, that is Shravana. We need to think about it carefully, that is Manana. We need to make sense of it, and we need to put it into practice, that is Nididhyasana. Understanding his teachings is very, very essential, because if we don't understand his teachings correctly, we won't be able to put them into practice correctly.
Thank you, Michael. I think we'll go ahead with other questions. We have a couple of
Yes.
more questions.
Yes.
So this is from Suresh. What are the differences between a realized being and a jnani? Suresh, I'm not sure if it is non-realized being and a jnani or realized being and a jnani,
Well,
but the question says realized being and a jnani.
This term realized being, this is an English term. It's not really a very appropriate term, because when we say a realized being, people often talk about a realized person. But if we understand realization to mean knowing ourselves as we actually are, there can be no such thing as a realized person. Because so long as we take ourselves to be a person, we don't know what we actually are. When we know what we actually are, we no longer experience ourselves as a person. So the so-called realized person is only in the view of others. We can say, for example, we can point out Bhagavan, he's a realized person. But the truth is, he is jnana itself. He is not a person. He seems to us to be a person, but he's actually jnana itself. Jnana is a much clearer term than realization. Realization can have many different meanings. People understand it in many different ways. Bhagavan sometimes used to joke about Bhagavan generally didn't speak much in English, but he understood English, and sometimes he would speak in English just to make a point clear. So he sometimes said about this English term realization. He said, what is real is always real, so it doesn't need to be realized. The problem is we have realized the unreal. So all that we need to do is to unrealize the unreal, and the real alone will remain. He had a very nice sense of humor, but there's a very deep teaching in that if we understand what he means. We take as real this body and world. We take this body to be I. We've realized the ego by identifying ourselves as this body. Now we need to unrealize this ego by knowing ourselves as we actually are.
So what is the Tamil equivalent for realized being, Michael?
Jnani.
Oh,
and
there's no difference.
Bhagavan said, jnana me jnani. Jnana alone is the jnani. Because what does jnana mean? Jnana means pure awareness, Suddha Chaitanya. That is jnana. What knows pure awareness is the jnani. But what knows pure awareness can only be jnana itself. That is, jnana can never be an object of awareness. So we can know jnana only by being jnana. As he says in Upadeshundiya, Tana iritale, tanna yaritalam. Being oneself alone is knowing oneself. Oneself there means oneself as jnana. In verse 13 of Vuluddhanabdi, he says, Jnanamam tane me. Oneself who is jnana alone is real. So jnana is that pure awareness I am.
Yes, makes sense. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we have a question from Sanjay Lohia. Please go ahead with your question, sir.
So, sir, I believe Muruganar passed away. When Muruganar passed away, he had handed over, as you said, about 14,000 of his unpublished verses to Sadhu Om. Is it correct, sir?
Yeah, that is, there were about 14,000 verses that hadn't been published. He had all his manuscripts, he said, should be only Sadhu Om should edit his manuscripts. So Sadhu Om had already begun the process of classifying those verses under different headings and organizing them. He had begun that long before, right, during Murugan's time, but it began to be published in book form only several years after Murugana left the body. So a lot of the groundwork had been done earlier, but it wasn't even completed in Sadhu Om's lifetime. I think about 5 or 6 volumes had come out in Sadhu Om's lifetime, but he had left everything, he had already arranged everything, so we were able to continue the work he left incomplete because he had already done the major part of the work.
So has it been completed now?
Yes, it's all published in a series of 9 volumes called Ramana Jnana Bodham.
So, but sir, we don't hear much about it. What exactly it contains?
Well, there are various books of translations of Murugana's verses, like Ramana Padamalai. That's extracts from one volume, that I think it's the 9th volume of Ramana Jnana Bodham. A time will come when someone will translate all the verses, but it's a huge 14,000 verses. There's a lot of verses.
So is it something like Guru Vachaka Koi or something different? Is it on the same lines?
It's similar, but I mean there are a lot of different. Murugana is talking of a lot of the central subject. Always with Murugana is Bhagavan's grace, what Bhagavan's grace did.
So, sir, do you remember any of the verses which has appealed to you from that Ramana Jnana?
I don't know many. Sadhu Om used to sometimes tell me the meaning of some verses while we were editing. At present, nothing comes to my mind.
Yeah, because it's 14,000 verses, and like we hardly know about it. What exactly is there?
Yeah, yes. Well, even those who know Tamil, very few have read it. Unfortunately, Murugana's Tamil is not the easiest Tamil. Generally speaking, Sadhu Om's verses are much easier to understand. But many people, the trouble is, most of the Tamil devotees of Bhagavan are English educated, and many of them have studied medicine or engineering or computer science or something. They are not very well versed in Tamil. So many of my Tamil friends say they have difficulty reading even Bhagavan's verses, which is unfortunate, but Bhagavan will take care of all these things. He will bring people who will share these Tamil works with the wider public by translating into other languages.
So, sir, is it available in the ashram, this the Ramana Jnana Bodham?
I think when they were published, it was published by Ramana Kendra Delhi with financial assistance from the central government, the Ministry of Education. But only 500 copies, I think, were published of each one. But all 9 volumes are available on the ashram website in PDF form.
So, sir, have you Have you read them? The entire 14,000 verses?
No, nothing like. I well, as I say, if I really try, I can understand Murugan's, well, not all of Murugan's verses, but some of his verses I can understand. But it takes me a long time to work out what they mean. So it would take, with my present knowledge of Tamil, it would take me many lifetimes to decipher them all.
So, sir, basically, Muruganar is talking about Bhagavan's grace there. That's the
Well,
center.
yeah, in so many different ways. I mean, he's talking about Bhagavan's teachings and everything, but the central theme is Bhagavan's grace, yes. But all of Bhagavan's teachings are his grace. So, I mean, Bhagavan is grace itself. And he's writing all about Bhagavan.
So, what prompted them to write so much? Muruganar, Sadhu Om means, what was the prompting? What exactly?
Divine inspiration. But when the day before Sadhu Om came to Bhagavan, that he came to Bhagavan on the, I think, 6th of July, 1946. The day before that, there was some talk in Bhagavan's hall. Some people were talking about nowadays the standard of Tamil education has fallen so low. Everyone wants to learn English and wants to study medicine or engineering. So nobody is caring about Tamil. So because the standard of Tamil education has fallen so low nowadays, we can't expect to see poets like Bhagavan or Murugana from the younger generation. And then Bhagavan, at that point, Bhagavan intervened and said, no, it is not so. It's not to do with education. What education did Jnana Sambandha have? He was a small boy, just a few years old when he started singing. It was divine inspiration. And Bhagavan also referred to Aranagiri Nata, a great saint of Tiruvannamalai, a great Muruga Bhakta, who's one of the most wonderful Tamil poets. He's written a wonderful, his verses have been collected together under the name Tirupahal, and really very wonderful verses. He was the son of a Devadasi, and when he was young, his mother passed away. And before she passed away, she said to his elder sister that she should take care of him like her own child. So his sister was always taking care of him. When he grew up to be a teenager, because he grew up in that society among the Devadasis, he became a debaucher. He always wanted to go with the girls and everything. So he was always asking his sister for money. And she knew what he wanted it for, to spend on the other Devadasis. So she was always giving him whatever she could because of the promise she had made to her mother. But finally, she had nothing left to give. So one day when he came to her and asked for money, she said, I have nothing to offer you. All I can do is to offer you my own body. And that was a great shock for him. Then he understood what a wretched life he'd been living. So in the Arunacheshwara temple, when you come in through the main Gopuram, not the main Gopuram, the second Gopuram, he climbed up to the top of that Gopuram, and he was a Muruga Bhakta. He prayed to Muruga, this body is such a wretched body, it doesn't deserve to live, but you should save me. Not meaning save the jiva, not the body. So he jumped off the tower to put an end to the life of his body. Muruga appeared and stopped him and said, Sumeru, just be. And I think Muruga wrote on his tongue some Tamil letters, and from that moment he became a great Tamil poet. So he wasn't educated. He spent all his life just in living a life of debauchery. But because of the divine grace, he became a great poet. So Bhagavan told all this and said, or I don't know, he wouldn't have, may not have told all the details, but he referred to Jnana Sambandha and Arunagirinatha and maybe one or two other poets. And he said, what education did they have? It's by divine grace. So if the divine grace is there, the education doesn't matter. The presence or absence of education is irrelevant. And so even nowadays, there will be such divinely inspired poets. The next day, Sadhu Om came there, and on the train while coming, he had written some verses, and he sang the verses in front of Bhagavan. And he gave the verses. Bhagavan took the verses and made a slight change to the title of one of the songs. And he then said, have you shown this to Murugana? At that time, Murugana wasn't there in the hall. So Sadhu Om said, who is Murugana? Bhagavan said he lives in Palakottu. Where is Palakottu? Sadhu Om asked. Sadhu Om said afterwards he used to feel so foolish. The only questions he asked Bhagavan was, who is Murugana and where is Palakottu? So Bhagavan said told him where to go, where to find Murugana. So Sadhu Om took the verses, went to Murugana, showed them to Murugana. Murugana also read them and saw that Bhagavan had made some small changes. When later that day, when Murugana came into the hall, Bhagavan said, see what we were talking about yesterday. Today, a very good example has come. So what that means is, Sadhu Om, Murugana was a great pundit. He was a Tamil pundit as well as being a poet. Sadhu Om just had his basic school education. But even from the age of 14 or something, he had started composing verses. So it came to him just naturally by divine grace. So it's only by grace that Murugana and Sadhu Om have sung so many thousands of verses.
So, sir, it is not only verses. It can be in prose also.
Prose also, yes, but
what you are,
the prose is for us, but the verses are what just poured forth from their heart.
So what I'm trying to say is the same what they said in verses, like you are speaking to us, the same divine inspiration is coming through you from this prose. That's what I was trying to say.
Yes. Well, I can't. I mean, I can't. You can't compare me with them. I mean, no way. Yes. Ultimately, it's all happening by Bhagavan's grace. That is true.
That's what I'm saying. That the poetry is not essential.
Yeah.
For the grace to flow, the poetry is not essential. It can be through prose also.
Yes, true.
That was one. And secondly, sir, they had no intention of preserving it. Murugana or Sadhu, whatever they wrote, they didn't want to preserve it or that.
Murugana wrote many of his verses on a slate. So he'd write on one side of the slate, then he'd turn it over, write on the other side of the slate. Then if more verses came to him, he'd rub off the first verses and write over it. So Sadhu Om used to come there every day, and the first thing he would do, he would copy whatever verses were on the slate before Murugana wiped them out and wrote more verses.
So it was just pouring forth of their love. That's all.
Yes, just the love. That's it.
They didn't want anything more.
No, nothing more than that.
It was just an expression of their love. That's all. Finished.
Yes.
After that, whatever is done by that, it's immaterial.
Yes, exactly. They composed the verses for Bhagavan, and having composed it, the work was done.
Work was done. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Sadhu Om told me that many of verses he had composed that he had not preserved. Some notebooks were there with the verses, but he said many he had composed for Bhagavan, and that's all that mattered.
That's a sign of a true devotee. A true devotee would not like to preserve. He just wants.
It's only for Bhagavan.
It's only for Bhagavan.
Yes.
Beautiful, sir. Beautiful. Thank you, sir.
You're right.
Thank you, Michael. I think we are on time, so we have few unanswered questions which we can go through in the next session.
Okay.
Is that okay, Michael?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much for your time, Michael.
Okay, right.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone.
Namo
Namo
Ramanaya.
Ramanaya.
Namo Ramanaya.